There we are. So, hi everyone, welcome back to 50 Hitting 50, and a big round of appreciation and applause for today's wonderful guest, Geoff McGimpsey, who is the bravest of us all because he is actually the first to take the plunge and come on here and talk about this with us. So, thanks, Geoff, for being the man.
No, you're very good. No, I was very pleased of the invitation, but the speed by which you managed to turn it around from an idea to a thing is it was very impressive. So I sort of vaguely said, "Yeah, sure, that sounds like a really great idea," and now here we are. So no, it is. It's a good thing to be involved in. So yeah, as soon as I heard the concept for it, I thought I've definitely got to be involved in some shape or form at some point. But let that point be now. Why not?
Fantastic. Well, look, so you are one of the forerunners, if you like. So you've just recently had a birthday.
Yes.
Can you give us a little bit of an insight into whether or not that actually meant something to you, what your thoughts were about it, or whether it's just been business as usual?
It wasn't problematic. It definitely isn't business as usual. I took a view on this about 18 months ago. I could see that there was something inevitable that was coming down the track at me. 50 was going to land. And I thought, what if I start that decade in the right way? What if I started and I've shorn all of those difficult habits that I've been trying to get rid of for a while? Why don't I just start it all clean, spring clean, get rid of all the excess baggage of various things and start 50 with a nice clean slate, and then put your best foot forward, etc. So over the last 18 months, I've become, I suppose for anybody who knows me, I've become increasingly more boring, but I've cut things out. Like I've cut out alcohol, I've cut out coffee, I've turned myself around from being a night person. I was positively vampiric for most of my life, and now I'm a committed morning person because I like the idea of getting up early, and before you've gone to work, you've done 2 or 3 things. You already started it. You've got a bit of momentum. You're making some level of progress, even if it's cleaning the house or whatever it happens to be. But I've changed a few habits and a few things around so that whenever I hit 50, I would at least feel like I was on top of things a little bit, or a little bit more on top of things. So I used it as as something to aim at, but not something to be upset about, if that makes sense. So it was sort of it sort of galvanized me into doing things that I possibly had been putting off for quite some time, for too long in fact. So that's how I viewed it or went about it.
That's such a great way to approach it, Geoff. I love that. I mean, this idea that you took a kind of a runway up to it almost, and used it as a point at which you were able to pivot, not in kind of a direction terms, but in these changes that you wanted to make. So you used the term hitting 50, and that's kind of what I had said when I was putting the title on this. But something else that's come up is that people use different terms when they are talking about this milestone. So people might say they're turning 50, they're hitting 50, they're approaching 50, or they might kind of avoiding 50 altogether. Was it a hitting 50 thing for you, and what does hitting it mean?
This was definitely a hitting. This isn't some sort of, I suppose that turning 50's got a level of sort of passivity about it or something. Whereas this is something that you're hitting it, and whether you hit it in a good frame of mind or positive, negative, or whatever it is you're bringing to it, you're hitting something that is a bit different. So whatever in my view you were doing with life up until now, I think from 50 onwards, I think you touched upon it last week. You're much more confident. I think you feel just much more at home in your own skin, and you sort of see the world in a much more see the world as it is, and in a much more sort of pragmatic way. So I do feel like 50 is such a. I genuinely feel positively about it because I really do feel like I'm confident that I know a thing or two. Finally grown up, so it's not.
Now, Geoff, come on, don't.
That's too much. Nobody will believe that. Nobody will believe it.
Yeah. No, that again, I agree with you, and I think I feel kind of excited about it actually. It is that I don't know. I'm not sure if part two or a second act or something is quite the right way to put it, but there's this sense of, okay, so we've got this far, we're pulling all this together, and there are so many possibilities from here.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
No,
definitely how I feel.
yeah, no, and I think as well, just that you I suppose careers or the way you go, the way you go about life, you've got definite phases, and I suppose at this stage I've kind of started within communications, and I'm still broadly within that in that bit. But you've got different phases of how your career developed and went. And I'm sort of look ahead, and I'm now sort of working in a bit more of a sort of internal communications role, which is it's a new challenge for me. But there's new ways to challenge yourself, in terms of a career or the way or what you do with your spare time, your hobbies or side hustling. There's so many more options, I think, and there's so many different ways to develop your career from this point onward. So it's not you get to 50 and you look ahead and you think, well, it's the running down the hill towards retirement. I don't see it in quite that in quite that way. So it's.
So can I ask you then, if you think back, and we mentioned just before we came on air about, when we were 25, if we think back to around that time, what did you imagine this was going to be like? Or did you?
I honestly, I didn't really think about it that hard, I have to say. Whenever I was 25, there was definitely no plan in place. I sort of came out and I knew at that point that what I was going to do was largely going to be based around writing. That was something, if I looked around my skills, and everybody's got their own suite of skills, pick out the one and you think most likely it's going to, give you some, give you some gainful employment, and off you go. And mine was, I thought my skill was writing. So I knew journalism was going to be the first step. But, by degrees, you move from journalism, then I went into press office work and then PR, and we have the same employer at different stages in our careers. We were in the PR side of things, but I sort of knew where the starting point was, but I just couldn't see where the destination would be. So I was sort of happy with the starting point, and then just let things unfold and develop from there. So that's beyond that. I didn't have a vision for what 50 was going to be. I maybe should have done, because that's the fail to plan. What's it? Prepare to you fail to plan to fail. So you need to have a plan, but I always treated the plan as a basic sense of direction. I didn't follow anything rigidly, so I kind of had my sense of direction and off I marched. But I didn't think I have a hard sense of where I was going to end up at this point. So that is a good way of avoiding disappointment, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm far more planned in a way now. I mean, I can see what I want to do now, but for me, it was, like you say, following those dots. And I think it was Steve Jobs said that you can only join the dots looking backwards. So it's been a bit like that for me as well, kind of trying all these things and then working out what comes together from them, and distilling it and then creating something new from that.
Yeah. And I suppose maybe I was trying to think through, your bit where you were in PR and then into the neuroscience bit. And I was trying to think of it, and this was a question I was going to sort of bring to you, is how you linked it, or how you sort of moved from one to the other. And in my head, I was thinking, look, within PR, your job essentially is to affect change, whether that is you're affecting change in terms of behavioral change, or you're changing opinion, or you're trying to influence change in some shape or form, depending on what the message is, or your audience, or your customer, etc. Is that the fundamental thing? Is the excitement or the application of your skills towards driving a change of types? What drove it? It's such an exciting way to go. So
it's the ultimate rabbit hole. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You've really put your finger on it, because we are both in that sphere of communication. So when you get communication and change, it's using that applied neuroscience kind of knowledge and base and tools and all the rest of it to drive that is like match made in heaven, really. And it's just so exciting. And I suppose that's maybe part of what's behind my kind of personal excitement at this stage, is that there are so many things to explore. There's so much happening. There's so much going on. And just being able to put your finger on those, to even sit in the same room as where these amazing discoveries are being made, and these all of this stuff is opening so many doors and helping us to see the world differently. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and you sort of look at all of that. So when did you first get involved in neuroscience? Was that something that was running alongside the sort of I know you were doing your sense where you got that sort of entrepreneurial side of what you do as well. So when did this sort of emerge and sort of flower over the last while?
So I'd been doing a lot of reading and studying, just kind of for fun along the way, because that was the sort of thing I would do. And then I started pulling threads when the kids were small, because, just in terms of their learning, and I knew that mainstream wasn't going to be a fit for one of them. So trying to understand the learning process and how learning happened. So I kind of, naturally segued into neuroplasticity, neuroscience of change, all that sort of stuff. And from there, I mean, once you get hold of one of those threads and you start pulling, you keep going and going and going and going. And it is one of those things where I think no matter how far into it you go, there's no end to it. And that's the other thing about it, that, every time you learn something new, every time you get to apply something new, it's like we're our own clients. We get to make that little push forward as well for ourselves, as well as being able to deal with the people around us differently too. So
it's interesting. And you're like this, and that's your journey over, maybe, is that 15 years or 10 years? Is that your?
It's a good 10 anyway. Yeah,
it's good. And so for you, I mean, look, for me, I'm not sure well, there was rarely a hard plan for me anyway. But whenever you look ahead, you're on that point of 50, and you look ahead, given the journey you've just had and how far, I suppose, in terms of that distance between, where you started in that sort of 10 years ago to where you are now. How do you view the next 10 years, or how are you approaching the next 10 years in terms of, maybe there's a couple of things there, maybe in the career side of things, but also sort of family side, but just on the career bit, what do you hope to get out of the next period?
Well, I guess for me, it's all about making sure that there is access to more brain literacy tools, so it's very mission driven for me right now, because I see the difference that it makes when we've got people who are able to tap into this stuff. And I mean, I don't really want to dwell too much on career stuff in this, because very much a life thing as well. And to tap into that life part of the question there, that one of the really interesting things I see at the moment is watching my kids, who are now at that stage where they're looking for their direction. And, even thinking about the way the world is for them as they emerge into it, versus how it was for us. And, the opportunities that are open to them that weren't there for us, but also the things that they have to contend with that we never had to think about. So that aspect of it is very interesting for me as well. There are no two generations that really, these days anyway, I don't know if it was ever the same before, but there are no two generations who have the same experience of this kind of transition from one stage to the next.
I sort of think about I suppose you think about your life in terms of epochs, so the arrival of, we'll have seen the arrival of home computing and Sinclair Spectrums and Commodores, and nobody had one. And then, and you're right. And you sort of looked at where we are now, and how hyper connected we all are, and how hyper connected the kids are, and the things that just wasn't there whenever I was younger. It was, you had 4 channels, and that was it. And I was taking my eldest over to he's in a university in Edinburgh, and there's a museum there. I can't remember the name of the museum, but it's kind of it's a museum. It could have been technology museum or something of that nature. But the gadgets that we would have been using or would have been familiar with in the early
Oh no,
80s,
don't
which
tell me
is
they're in a museum.
that they're in a museum. I genuinely saw a ZX 16K sitting there with the little rubber keys. And it's in a museum piece, and boy, did I feel old at that stage. So, you move from that object to like the iPhone 12, which is, or 10 or whatever kids are, whichever kids have got in their pocket in a minute. And it's just such a powerful and dramatic difference between what we had to contend with and what they're now confronted with in terms of sort of information flow, etc. So it's, different world.
So, I mean, obviously a lot of change has happened, and I mean, it seems exponential at the moment, Geoff. But just what do you think looking forward? It's going to be like in the next 25 for you. I mean, we've looked back to 25. What about looking forward to 75?
Oh my gosh! I'm not sure. I think at the minute so I've got 4 kids. So so all thoughts are are based around that. What, it's their aspirations. It's how you sort of guide and how you can sort of help them and support them is to move on to their next phase of life. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And whenever I think about 60, 65, 70, it's where will I be is almost sort of secondary to where will the kids be. So it's kind of that's kind of where my thinking is, which is there's a pattern emerging here. Like I don't necessarily have a fully a fully realized vision in grand technicolor of where I want to be in a certain point in time, but I do have a certain sense of direction and what I want, what I broadly want to be doing over a period. But it's definitely sort of all wrapped around 4 kids. So we've got 1 in Edinburgh at the minute. He's off in university, and then we've got another 3 to make to work their way through school careers. So we'll see how we get on. It's
see how you get on,
yeah. So
it's funny. I was talking to a woman yesterday, and she and her family had moved lock, stock, and barrel from the States to here a couple of years ago, and her kids are in their mid to late teens now. And what she was saying was that the grandparents were still in the States, and with aging parents, it wasn't entirely how the parents had envisaged what would happen. There was kind of that expectation that it would sort of follow a path, and they would all be close together for a certain amount of time and so on. But of course, we as the parenting generation really have no understanding of where our kids' lives are going to take them. And these expectations, I think, that we might sometimes have of that, we have to hold them very, very lightly, don't we? Because they're not really ours in that way. These expectations are joint and several and largely unspoken in a lot of ways.
You sort of do take, I suppose, based on performance in the past, you expect that's going to be sort of repeated, or in some shape or form will repeat itself in the future. So the kids have always been around, or at least that those same sort of actors around you have always been in place. So naturally they'll always be there in future. But if I get my eldest onto a conversation around what he wants to do in life, he wants to do it in a completely different landmass. So it's the awareness of the sort of the world that's out there, and for me, it's whenever I was his age, I did not have that level of confidence or possibly that level of curiosity, and that's maybe something that's to be spoken for, and definitely in the plus column for the younger generations, is that they absolutely have this level of confidence and willingness and desire to go and explore the world that maybe I possibly didn't have at that stage in life. So he's got all of that he wants to sort of, once he packs up his degree, he'll disappear. I've absolutely no doubt. But I think if I was 20 again, I could totally see where he's coming from. And I would that's maybe if there's a gap or something that I really ought to have done. But I've always thought I really ought to have maybe traveled more or taken that year out of college. Didn't really do that. I spent a little bit of time in London, but that's lived there for a couple of years just to expand the journalism career a little bit more, which was useful, served a purpose, and then I came home again. But yeah, didn't really go far beyond these borders. Should have done it.
But yeah, I mean, well, I guess when I was in secondary school, I just couldn't wait to get away. That was not particular, not from family or home or anything, but from that place, because it just felt like, there were more interesting things going on. I could access different stuff. And, I came up here to come to art college, basically, which was about as far as I could get at the time. So this idea, though, going back to the kind of moving on to uni and stuff, there's this almost kind of embedded sense that we're in some kind of race, and it's like, okay, we've got to get through school, got to get through uni, got to get through that. And it's like, I'm not sure that model works anymore. I think we have to really rethink how we do this and how we approach, what we're doing and why we're doing it. And if we really don't know just yet what it is that we want out of uni, or whatever further education we might be thinking of doing, then is it the right time to do it? It's just because we're of an age where everybody seems to be going off to do this. Is that the right thing for us?
Yeah. There's definitely there's a sort of level of expectation that we would all have had whenever we were younger, and even for my own kids, they just simply aren't. They don't have that level of burden. They don't, or weight of expectation around what their decisions should be. They're much more. I'm not sure if it's definitely not the it could be a statement onto the nature of the parenting they got, because I would be just like anybody else. There's nothing really extraordinary about that, but they're much more in control, or much more decisive, or much more in front of their career options or life options than I would have been. So they're certainly doing something right, whether it's down to the education, their friends, or how they how they communicate or articulate themselves as a group. It's interesting. But the result is that I don't think my kids are, as you say. I just don't think that they view the world as a series of steps or a ladder or something that as a sort of beautifully timed sequence. You move from one to the sequence to the next, which would have been drummed into my head as a kid. The life is a sequence of events, and this is how you move up the ladder. I don't think they think in quite that way.
Well, actually, I mean, even if they had thought in that way up until, let's say 2019, for instance, I think it became very clear that after that, it's not necessarily ever going to be linear again. No. Or at least if it does appear to be linear, then there's a great chance that something can interrupt it. It's definitely a lesson learned, I think, from that. Here, so can I ask you another one?
Sure.
If you had to choose one or two words for 50, what would you choose? Like kind of mottos or mantras or something?
Well, there's a couple of things I have over the last 18 months, 24 months or so, got there's a bunch of books you sort of get into those sort of books that help you to sort of think through what does the next 10 years look like. It's not self-help, it's more sort of these career things that you sort of pick up that you're much more sensitive to, and you read them a bit more. Eckhart Tolle is very good, but I've just finished Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnie's actually a good one. Yes, that could be a nice descriptor for the way I should approach 50 or think about 50. It's the same. I feel very. I think that's where the relationship or connection between myself and Arnie absolutely stops and ends. But I think he's definitely onto something.
Apart from you'll be back.
Apparently I will. But that's my inspiration is Arnie this month anyway. But I think there's something in that. It's using there is absolutely a finite amount of time, and that's the real difference. And this is why that particular book spoke to me. is because whenever you're younger, time stretches away into this amorphous distance that you simply aren't going to arrive there. There's too much of it to consider, so let's just get on with what's happening today. But I'm not there anymore. Time is finite, and I can see that it is becoming more and more limited, more and more scarce. How do you use that time much more productively? How do you become more useful? How do you make that time useful for you? So that's how I'm approaching it. And that is to say, I wish I had have done that without Arnie's help, but I am absolutely reparceling up Arnie and selling it as my ambition for my 50s. But I don't. Why not? I say it's a good idea. It's a good approach.
It's not where you take it from; it's where you take it to, Geoff.
I will quote that liberally in future. So that's my my thought.
I love that because I mean, that's it, isn't it? That we are here to contribute. We're here to make the world a better place. We're here to do all of these things and to put what we have learned along the way into use as well. So I 100% support that. In fact, I might change mine now. I like that so much.
Yes. So I spin it around then. And I don't think you covered this off with Martin last week, but how would the same question just spin around to what would your motto be, or what would your would you frame things?
Well, I'm going to go with what Arnold Schwarzenegger said about. No,
it's quite a popular answer around here. Yeah.
I actually have a couple of words that keep popping into my head about this, and one of them is present. And as in being present to this, being present to the things that are going on around me in the world, the people that I meet, my own self, my body and what it is doing at this stage. But also there's a real sense of, I think I mentioned earlier, excitement about it.
Yeah.
And just working out how I can bring all of this to bear, make it useful. So maybe they're not that far apart after all.
No, just right. I do think there's, and I think that physical side of things was something that really struck me as well. And so I've done a wee bit more running, and I signed up for a marathon. Now I'm not a natural runner, so this will be interesting. So I've sort of started that training program bit, but I sort of thought it's out there. Give yourself, again, it's more about that sort of being a bit more goal orientated. Just think about how can you spend your time more usefully, go out and put some miles in, have a goal to aim for. So I think more of that. I'll be doing more of that type of thing over the next 10 years. Give yourself little goals and then just pick them off. See if it takes you in the right place.
Oh, well, that does sound horrendous. Actually, no, I'm not a marathon runner at all. but I do like my bike, so I'll tell you what, you run it, I'll ride it, and we'll see who gets home first.
Yeah, I think everybody's getting home in front of me. That's for sure. But we'll see what it looks like on May I think Belfast Marathon's May the 4th or May the 5th. Anyway, so I've got a couple of months yet.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic! Well done. Yeah.
And
have you run a marathon before?
I haven't. I've done a half, but that's it. So but it's a bucket list thing. I don't foresee myself being a marathon runner. It's do it, tick the box, move on to something
amazing.
less annoying.
You kept that one quiet to the end of the episode. I mean, that's quite a thing to do. Your first marathon at 50. Well done.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Let's. Yeah, I'm genuinely looking forward to it, but I'm doing it with my nephew, who is quite a bit fitter than me. So I suspect we'll be doing different times, or I'll be following a different group than he will. But in a little while, maybe bring us a bit closer together. Those sorts of benefits of doing something with somebody and having yourself like a shared common goal with somebody else. It's all good stuff. So.
You will definitely have to come back and tell us how that went. I know we've had people popping in and out of the stream as we've been talking, and I can't see names, unfortunately, on this system. And I'm not, if there were any comments, I haven't got those through either. So I really apologize. But I would love to say a big thank you to everyone who has dropped in to see us, anyone who's watching it afterwards. If you're watching it afterwards, by the way, say hi as well and let us know if anything pinged a string for you. Geoff, you have been an absolute star. Thank you so much again, because I know that coming on to a conversation like this where you don't really know where it's going to go, and as we discovered last week, it can get quite emotional quite quickly. So it's really just, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and to really find these different aspects of this same thing that we have in common. And that, I think, for me is the really fascinating part of this experiment, is that every time I talk to somebody about this, I get a different insight into it.
No, totally,
And it's like
totally.
we're all looking at the same thing through different keyholes, and by looking through the different ones, we get a little bit more insight into it. So that for me was an absolute joy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, really, really looking forward to what you do with the rest of the series. I know you've got a lot of very interesting folks coming on. But as you say, how is everybody approaching it or cutting the same problem? So yeah, it's good to get the thing rolling. But really, really interested to see where you take it from here. So look, thanks for the opportunity. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, listen, I'm going to cut this now, Geoff. Please don't go anywhere. But it will look like it's cutting you off for now. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next week.